Christine Brown had spent years carrying the weight of the Brown family's daily life on her shoulders. Cooking for a large family, teaching the children, endless piles of laundry, constant dishes, and grocery trips big enough to feed an army, these were her responsibilities, and she embraced them without complaint. She was the quiet force that kept the household running. Yet, despite the picture of unity shown to the cameras, the reality inside the family was much more fractured. Kody Brown, the man at the center of this sprawling polygamous family, often spent his time moving between other wives' homes, his presence in Christine's space growing less and less. It wasn't just a physical absence, it was an emotional one, a gap that widened with each passing year. Christine was different from many of the other wives. She didn't swallow her feelings for the sake of keeping the peace. She spoke openly, asked difficult questions, and challenged Kody when she saw hypocrisy or unfairness. In most marriages, this kind of honesty would be considered a strength. But to Kody, it seemed to be a source of friction, something he resisted rather than valued. The distance between them didn't erupt overnight, it was a slow and painful erosion, marked not by loud fights but by the quiet ache of being unseen and unheard. Over time, the warmth that had once drawn them together seemed to fade, replaced by a cold politeness that Christine could feel in every interaction. Then came the moment that would change everything. One day, in a conversation that she would never forget, Kody told her bluntly that he was no longer attracted to her. The words hit like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just an offhand remark, it was the culmination of years of neglect, a final confirmation that the love and desire she had once believed in were gone. For any spouse, hearing such words would be devastating. But in a plural marriage, where the fight for emotional connection is already competitive and fragile, this was more than just rejection, it was abandonment. It was a public, undeniable statement that she was no longer wanted in the same way. Christine realized in that moment that her happiness, her self-worth, and her future could not depend on a man who no longer valued her. The truth was stark, no one was going to rescue her. If she wanted freedom, if she wanted to reclaim her dignity, she would have to walk away herself. And so she did. In a move that would make history in the Brown family's story, Christine became the first wife to leave Kody Brown. It was not just a personal decision, it was a defiance of an unspoken rule in many polygamous families, that wives stay, no matter how unhappy, for the sake of the family structure. Her departure wasn't quiet. It sent shockwaves through the household and through the millions of viewers who had followed sister wives for years. For the children, it meant a new reality, holidays and traditions now split between homes. For the other wives, it forced an uncomfortable reckoning with the cracks in their own relationships with Kody. And for Kody, it shattered the image he had tried to project, that of a man at the center of a thriving plural marriage. Publicly, Kody framed the split as entirely Christine's choice, sidestepping his role in the breakdown. But viewers, who had seen years of on-camera emotional neglect, knew the truth was more complicated. To outsiders, it might have looked like just another divorce. But those who understand the dynamics of polygamy saw it for what it was, a rebellion against an entire system of control. Christine's exit proved that the husband doesn't hold all the power when a wife decides to take it back. She didn't leave in secret. She didn't leave in shame. She left with her head held high, stating her reasons clearly and unapologetically. In doing so, she became a symbol, not just for women in polygamous marriages, but for anyone in a relationship where respect and love had faded. After leaving, Christine stepped into a life that felt lighter, freer, and more authentically her own. She began building new traditions with her children, exploring relationships on her own terms, and reconnecting with the parts of herself she had lost in years of endless work and emotional compromise. On social media, she shared moments of genuine joy, smiles that reached her eyes, laughter unclouded by tension. Fans, who had watched her journey with empathy, rallied around her. They saw her not as a victim, but as a survivor who had made the courageous choice to put her own well-being first. Christine's departure will be remembered not just in the timeline of sister wives, but in the larger conversation about women's autonomy in controlling relationships. She showed that leaving is not failure, it can be the victory. She dismantled the myth that a wife's value is tied to her willingness to endure neglect. She proved that even in a family structure designed to keep her in place, she could still walk away. And by doing so, she inspired countless others to ask themselves the same question she had asked: am I truly valued here? Her story is one of resilience, self-respect, and truth-telling. Christine didn't just leave Kody Brown, she left behind the rules that had kept her small. She stepped into a future where she sets the boundaries, she makes the choices, and she decides her worth. And in that choice lies the real power, the power to change not just her own life, but the lives of everyone watching who now knows that it's possible to break free. Christine Brown's farewell was presented to the public as a bittersweet family closure, a moment meant to look peaceful and final. But beneath the surface, the scene carried an entirely different weight, a carefully staged emotional trap. While the cameras rolled, what should have been a respectful goodbye turned into an orchestrated moment where Christine was placed in the center of a subtle yet cutting performance. Questions came not just from the adults but from children, questions that were far too pointed, far too mature, to have originated solely from their young minds. Viewers noticed the pattern instantly. The words, though spoken by the children, bore the unmistakable tone of adult influence. It was as if the young ones had been handed a script, probing Christine's choices, questioning her motives, echoing the very criticisms that had been whispered in private by Kody and Robin. In a healthy family dynamic, children are protected from adult conflicts. They are kept away from the emotional battles between their parents and shielded from the weight of blame. But in this moment, those boundaries were gone. The lines between child and adult, between innocence and manipulation, were blurred for the sake of one last attempt to paint Christine's departure in a certain light. The power imbalance was undeniable. Christine, already navigating the heartbreak of leaving not just a marriage but an entire family structure, was now forced to defend herself against questions delivered through the voices of children she loved. It was a tactic that cornered her emotionally, because how can a motherly figure respond with raw truth when the person asking is a child? How can she expose the deeper dysfunction without harming the very ones she is trying to protect? This was the quiet cruelty of the scene. Christine's restraint would be used against her, her inability to confront the children directly allowing the narrative to tilt toward Kody and Robin's version of events. Robin's presence in the farewell was equally telling. Her expressions and interjections seemed to frame Christine as the one walking away from unity, the one fracturing what could have been saved. Yet, many longtime viewers saw something else, an alignment between Robin and Kody that placed them firmly on one side, and Christine on the other. By letting the children's voices carry the message, the adults avoided direct confrontation, sidestepping responsibility for the tone of the farewell. It was, in many eyes, a display of emotional strategy rather than genuine reconciliation. What emerged from that scene was more than just a goodbye. It was a public revelation of the family's true fault lines, the absence of boundaries that allowed children to become messengers in adult disputes, the deep-rooted favoritism that consistently placed Robin in a position of protection, and the unspoken but palpable alliance between her and Kody. For Christine, the moment underscored why she had chosen to leave in the first place. Her departure was not only about escaping neglect, it was about stepping away from an environment where manipulation could be disguised as love, and where even a farewell could be weaponized. It began as what was supposed to be a light-hearted family segment for television, a chance to see the women of the Brown family come together, try something new, and focus on their health and fitness. But instead of becoming a moment of empowerment, it became one of the most uncomfortable and humiliating public displays they had ever faced. The cameras captured the scene in full, the family's women, standing in a gym, meeting a trainer who would quickly turn the session into a spectacle of shaming rather than support. From the very start, the tone was wrong. Instead of encouragement, the trainer's language was cutting. He assessed them not as whole people with lives, responsibilities, and emotions, but as measurements and numbers. Body size and shape became the centerpiece of the conversation, overshadowing health, overshadowing well-being, overshadowing the dignity of the women standing there. As the trainer spoke, his critiques weren't whispered or delivered with any sense of privacy, they were aired out in front of the cameras, in front of each other, and eventually, in front of the world once the episode aired. For viewers, the discomfort was immediate. Here were women who had already endured years of complex emotional battles within their marriage, the public scrutiny of a reality TV audience, and the daily weight of managing large families. And now, Instead of being uplifted in what could have been a transformative moment for their physical and mental health, they were being reduced to statistics and aesthetics. The trainer's approach was not about empowerment, it was about control through humiliation. The impact was visible in the women's faces. There were tight smiles that didn't reach their eyes, sideways glances of embarrassment, and the quiet tension of people trying to hold back their true reactions for the sake of the cameras. Even in a plural marriage, where compromise and resilience are everyday survival tools, this moment felt different. This was not just discomfort, it was the stripping away of personal dignity in a way that was deeply public and deeply personal. Body image is already a complex issue, especially for women living under the public eye. Add to that the cultural and interpersonal dynamics of a plural family, where comparisons, spoken or unspoken, are constant, and the trainer's comments took on a sharper edge. They weren't simply about fitness. They were about worth. About the unspoken but undeniable hierarchy of appearance and desirability that can seep into a relationship dynamic like theirs. For Christine, Mary, Janelle, and the others, the moment underscored how easily their value in certain settings could be reduced to their physical appearance. Years of being caregivers, homemakers, emotional anchors, and financial contributors could be overshadowed in seconds by a man with a clipboard announcing body fat percentages and goals as if that number determined the measure of their humanity. The public reaction after the episode aired was intense. Many viewers took to social media to call out the trainer's behavior as inappropriate and unprofessional. Fans expressed outrage at how the women were treated, noting that fitness and health should be about support and encouragement, not public shaming. In the comment sections, people shared their own experiences of being belittled in fitness environments, revealing just how common and damaging such treatment can be. The incident became more than just a moment in a TV show, it became a conversation about how society treats women's bodies, and the harm of equating self-worth with physical measurements. But perhaps the most significant part of this story came later, when Janelle made a change. She decided she would not let that humiliating moment define her journey toward better health. Quietly and without fanfare, she sought out a new trainer, someone whose approach was rooted in empathy and positivity. This trainer didn't focus solely on numbers or appearance. Instead, they worked with Janelle to set realistic goals, celebrate small wins, and prioritize strength and energy over aesthetics. The difference was night and day. Under the guidance of this supportive trainer, Janelle began to feel empowered rather than judged. Progress was measured not just in pounds or inches lost, but in how she felt, more energized, more confident, and more in control of her own health journey. She shared glimpses of this transformation on social media, and fans immediately noticed the change. Her smile was real now. Her eyes lit up in a way they hadn't in the gym scene from before. This wasn't just about fitness, it was about reclaiming her autonomy after an experience that had tried to take it away. Christine, too, spoke publicly about the importance of choosing the right kind of support system. In interviews, she acknowledged how uncomfortable that earlier session had been, and how critical it was to work with people who build you up rather than break you down. Her words resonated with many who had been in similar situations, where an authority figure's criticism crossed the line from constructive to cruel. In the broader cultural context, the trainer controversy became a stark example of how televised moments can carry lasting emotional weight. For some, it was just another reality TV subplot. But for others, it was a mirror reflecting their own experiences of being judged, shamed, or diminished in the name of improvement. It also shed light on the pressures that women in public life face, pressures that are amplified when their lives are intertwined with complex relationships, the gaze of millions of viewers, and the constant comparison to others around them. The lesson from Janelle's later success is one that extends far beyond the Brown family's story, that true progress, whether in health, relationships, or personal growth, comes from environments where people feel safe, respected, and encouraged. Public humiliation doesn't foster change, it fosters resentment, shame, and withdrawal. Support and understanding, on the other hand, can unlock motivation and resilience in ways that criticism never could. Looking back, that day in the gym stands as one of the more jarring moments in the family's televised journey. It stripped away the polished edges of reality TV and revealed something raw and unfiltered, the vulnerability of being judged for your body, the lasting sting of being shamed in public, and the courage it takes to rewrite the narrative after such a blow. In the end, Janelle's quiet but determined shift toward a healthier, more supportive path serves as a counterpoint to the trainer's cruelty, a reminder that dignity, respect, and self-worth should always outweigh the numbers on a scale. And perhaps that is the real takeaway for everyone who watched. That no matter how public the criticism, no matter how staged the humiliation, the power to define yourself never belongs to someone else holding a clipboard. It belongs to you, in the choices you make afterward, in the people you allow into your corner, and in the way you decide to measure your own worth. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, families everywhere faced new challenges: how to protect their health while maintaining connection. For the Brown family, however, the pandemic didn't just bring physical distance, it exposed the underlying fractures in their relationships. Kody Brown implemented what he described as strict health protocols, rules that were meant, on the surface, to safeguard everyone in the household. But it didn't take long for those rules to feel less like protection and more like selective enforcement. Kody's guidelines were rigid, down to controlling who could go where, what errands could be run, and how children interacted with one another. Yet the enforcement was strikingly uneven. While most of his wives and children experienced long stretches without seeing him, Kody remained physically present and deeply involved in the daily life of Robyn and her children. Visits to the other homes became rare, and contact with some of his older children, particularly Janelle's adult sons, was abruptly severed. The explanation was framed as health-based caution, but to many in the family, it felt like an excuse. Christine, Janelle, and even some of the older kids began to see a pattern. Kody's so-called COVID rules were applied in ways that aligned perfectly with where you wanted to be, and with whom. The message to those left out was unmistakable: you are not my priority. For Janelle's sons, the break in communication wasn't just about missing family dinners, it was a sign that their father's connection to them was conditional. Over time, even the children could see through the reasoning. They watched as Kody's presence in Robyn's home remained constant while his absence in others' homes stretched on for months. The pandemic had become a backdrop for a much deeper truth, that Kody's rules were a tool of control, not simply a measure for safety. The emotional fallout was significant. Relationships strained, trust eroded, and the sense of family unity, a value Kody had always claimed to champion, was replaced with quiet resentment and a deep sense of exclusion. That sense of imbalance was only compounded when another revelation emerged, one that caught even loyal viewers off guard. In a candid moment, Janelle admitted that although her romantic relationship with Kody had ended in practical terms, they still maintained a physical relationship. The admission was as surprising as it was telling. For Christine, who had been denied intimacy with Kody long before their separation, it was another painful confirmation that closeness with him was never simply about attraction, affection, or a shared history. It was about Kody's own preferences, his convenience, and his sense of control over who received his attention. The fact that Kody chose to maintain physical intimacy with Janelle, while withholding it entirely from Christine, spoke volumes about the power dynamics at play. It shattered the idea that his affections were distributed according to traditional romantic or emotional bonds. Instead, it suggested a more transactional reality: proximity and connection were granted where they served his needs, not where they nurtured the relationship. For viewers, the contrast was stark. Christine had spoken openly about the hurt and rejection she felt when Kody told her he was no longer attracted to her. She had endured years of emotional distance, with no physical closeness to bridge the gap. Meanwhile, Janelle's revelation suggested that intimacy with Kody could exist even when the emotional core of the relationship had faded, if Kody decided it should. The implication was unsettling, painting a picture of a man who viewed connection not as mutual but as something he could selectively give or withhold, entirely on his own terms. These two events, the selective COVID rules and the friends with benefits revelation, fit together like pieces of a larger puzzle. Both show how Kody's choices created and reinforced an imbalance in the family, deepening divides that were already growing. They reveal a pattern of behavior in which Kody's stated reasons, whether health precautions or personal preference, often masked a deeper truth: his relationships were managed not to maintain equality or fairness, but to preserve his own comfort, his own authority, and his control over who had access to him. In the end, these moments didn't just widen the gap between Kody and his wives, they also exposed to the world the fault lines that had always been there. For Christine, it was further validation of her decision to leave. For Janelle, it was another reminder of the compromises she had made. And for the children, it was a lesson, painful but impossible to ignore, about the reality of their family's dynamics. COVID may have been the catalyst, but it was never the true cause. The real divide came from choices, and those choices told the family exactly where they stood. Over the years, one truth became increasingly hard to ignore: Robyn's role in the Brown family was never about embracing the full spirit of plural marriage. From the beginning, her relationship with Kody existed in a category all its own, one defined by exclusivity, favoritism, and a shared sense of purpose that didn't extend to the other wives. While Kody publicly claimed to value equality among his partners, his actions told a different story. Robyn seemed far less interested in building genuine bonds with Christine, Janelle, or Mary, and far more focused on maintaining a competitive edge over them. In the early days, this competition was subtle, a carefully maintained image of being the most attentive, the most accommodating, the most emotionally available to Kody. But as time went on, and the competition began to disappear, especially after Christine's exit and Janelle's increasing independence, the dynamic between Robyn and Kody shifted. Without the thrill of rivalry, the relationship began to lose its spark. And yet, outwardly, life with Robyn continued to appear charmed. The luxury shopping trips continued. The carefully curated image of a close, intact household remained intact for the cameras. But behind closed doors, there was a growing emptiness, a lack of connection that no amount of new purchases or picture-perfect moments could truly hide. For many viewers, Robyn's position in the family came to symbolize the imbalance that had been festering for years. While other wives navigated the challenges of large families, emotional neglect, and financial sacrifices, Robyn seemed to live in a bubble of preferential treatment. The distance between her and the others wasn't just a byproduct of personality differences. It was the result of a deliberate alliance with Kody, one that ensured her needs were met first and foremost, even as the wider family structure fractured. The cracks in that structure were equally visible in the long, complicated history between Janelle and Mary. In the early years, the two women's relationship was strained from the start. What might have begun as the potential for friendship quickly soured under the pressures of shared marriage. Disagreements over household habits, how things should be cleaned, how chores should be divided, were small battles that carried bigger emotional weight in the high-pressure environment of polygamy. Add to that the deep sensitivities around childbearing, with Janelle and Mary each carrying their own unique struggles and experiences, and the foundation for lasting tension was set. Over time, these grievances solidified into a cold, unspoken hostility. They weren't openly at war, but they also weren't close. Family gatherings often saw them maintaining polite but distant interactions, with moments of warmth rare and fleeting. There was no single dramatic incident that explained it all, rather, it was years of unresolved resentment, personal slights, and personality clashes that built an invisible wall between them. Even when major events shook the family, Christine's departure, Janelle's eventual separation from Kody, Mary's own public challenges, this wall never truly came down. They could stand in the same room, share in the same family traditions, even appear united for the sake of the cameras, but the undertone of coldness remained. It was a reminder that in a plural marriage, the relationships between the wives can be just as complex, fraught, and emotionally loaded as the marriage to the husband himself. In many ways, these two dynamics, Robyn and Kody's insulated, self-serving alliance, and Janelle and Mary's decades-long chilly coexistence, were two sides of the same coin. Both illustrated the fragility of the idealistic image the Browns had once tried to project. Whether through favoritism that bred resentment, or wounds between wives that never healed, the reality was clear: the family's unity had been a facade for a very long time. And as the years passed, the gaps only widened, leaving relationships that could look intact from the outside but were, in truth, hollow at their core. Thanks for watching.